Well, I thought the chapters really helped sharpen the point and focus things like how do you message to veterans, why it's so important. And one of the chapters deals with employer misconceptions and veteran misconceptions. And again, you have an expert writing on this with a lot of evidence-based. But Nathan, why don't you talk to us a little bit about how this chapter sharpens the point on misconceptions going both ways?
Sure. One of the problems that we see with the employment situation is that there are two different camps. There's a big military-civilian divide with a gap. A small percentage of Americans have any connection to the military whatsoever. It's amplified because military service tends to run in families. So we're getting into two communities with very little overlap, and with that kind of overlap, misperceptions can easily develop. That someone could be sitting there wanting to hire someone who has never talked to anyone, met anybody from the military. Conversely, the veteran has lived in what they call America's greatest gated communities on military bases, surrounded by their military families, and can drop acronyms left and right that the civilian on the other side of the table doesn't understand. And starting from there, there can be misconceptions developing because they don't have the interactions. So frequently, the non-military member doing the interviewing may not understand what the person did if they only will talk acronyms, or if they are educated a bit and they know that 11 Bravo that they just mentioned meant that they were infantry. The civilian hiring manager may not find a match in their organization. They may think that infantry means you run around the field and carry guns and blow things up, which is not untrue, but we cite the research that's been done that shows that even at an entry-level position, an infantryman has a lot of skills such as leadership, planning, logistics, coping under pressure, which a civilian may be misconceived that they don't have all these skills. Conversely, the veteran on the other side, because they were surrounded by people who are excelling in all this training and all these skills, they don't realize that they have these unique characteristics that are in high demand in the civilian workforce, but not highly represented among civilians. So we have to really let the hiring manager know to look out for these things, to learn how to communicate, to talk through the acronyms, to become educated on what the military is like. And we talk about how the military will recruit and train and develop people. We looked at just the tuition assistance that gets offered to the members, puts DOD almost up there with the University of California and the University of Texas in terms of an educating institution, that they come in with all this training, all these experiences, and learn how to ask the questions as the recruiter and to describe them and break through the misconceptions as the veteran.
And I really think that there's misconceptions on both sides of the table. I think the veteran says, well, I listed my MOS. What more do I need to tell you? And without realizing the civilian employer, maybe it's the hiring manager, maybe it's the company owner, really has no idea what that is about, except maybe in the most general of terms. So they've both kind of approached this with misconceptions. And there's a big misconception. I give you guys credit for doing a chapter on hiring and employing wounded and disabled veterans. To deal with that set of misconceptions direct, and in particular, that the authors of that chapter sort of set out a stereotype, talked about what the facts are, and then supported those facts, and really attacked some of the concerns coming out of, veterans from Afghanistan who may be seen by employers as being a little damaged. Kristin, do you want to sort of take on that challenge of Chapter 7 and talk about what you were trying to accomplish as you were having this written up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important when we talk about veterans, we acknowledge the service and sacrifice that has been given, right, by themselves, and also we can't forget their families who have equally sacrificed in very unique and distinct ways, and oftentimes without really having the choice to make that sacrifice. And with that, though, comes the stereotypes that are presented in media, that are presented in various efforts, in communication efforts to, garner support. But that can also be damaging if it's perpetually an image of a wounded warrior. Because at the end of the day, that's an individual who happened to have an experience happen to them. what we actually find is that when we look at veterans and we look at people who serve, their incidence of, say, mental health disorders or issues are actually the same as the general population. But that's not the message that gets out there through the media. It's oftentimes, oh, a veteran has PTSD. Well, you know what? No, that's not actually the case. When we look across the board of those who are serving, it's around 20% might have some sort of mental health impairment, but that does not define them, right? We all have things that we struggle with, right? Whether it be your hip hurting or a mental health concern, or you are, missing a limb. These are all just things that we have in our lives, but they don't need to define us. And I think so often when we think about veterans, we let that disabled person image come first before the rest of the identity as a person. And that's something that we've really worked over the last decade in terms of national strategic efforts to move past, to shift that persona. And equally, employers need to hold themselves responsible as to, again, going back to that value proposition, why are you hiring the veteran? You're hiring the veteran because this is an incredible person who has not only gained experiences that have made them resilient and have incredible skills, but have also been through a lot of training, far more training than you'd see them experience in the civilian world. Leadership training, specific skills training, training on how to cope and be more resilient with stress, right? Those are very unique skill sets that you don't necessarily find encouraged and explicitly trained on and upskilled in people who are not serving in first responder communities. And so when we think about veterans, we really want to make sure that we are mindful of that individual, of the experiences and the benefits of that experience, and that we're not perpetuating this myth of the disabled veteran, if you will, as woe is me, if you will, as well.
Yeah, it's really it is really a myth, and
Mm-hmm.
gets portrayed on TV and cable way too much. And I actually run into people who say, well, veterans, only the uneducated and the poor are in the military, so they wouldn't be good job candidates because they're not educated. And nothing could be further from the truth. So I really appreciate that you sort of tackle that problem in the book, as well as the issue that, well, veterans are conditioned to follow orders and they lack any initiative in the workforce. And again, there's no data, there's no evidence that supports those kind of stereotypes, are there, Kristin?
Listen to this full episode and more on the Apple Podcasts app, Blog Talk Radio, Google Podcasts, or iHeartRadio. And now streaming on Amazon Music, Audible, and Spotify.